The Galactic Empire had ruled the stars for millennia, its dominion stretching across thousands of systems. To them, war was not a contest but an inevitability. Every species they encountered had either bowed to their rule or been wiped from existence. Their fleets were vast, their technology unmatched, and their soldiers conditioned for absolute victory. Then they found Earth. From the moment they intercepted human transmissions, the Empire dismissed the species as primitive. Their weapons relied on kinetic force rather than energy-based systems, their ships used outdated propulsion methods, and their military doctrine was laughably aggressive. Compared to the Empire's elegant, automated war machines, humanity appeared little more than barbarians playing at war. The High Council didn't even debate Earth's fate. The standard procedure was applied: a demand for surrender, a promise of protection under Imperial rule, and a warning of annihilation should they refuse. Earth's response was immediate. A single message: come and take it. The arrogance of the Empire was absolute. No species had ever dared to reject their ultimatum. The very idea that a backwater world would challenge them became a source of entertainment. Imperial news broadcasts ridiculed the humans, laughing at their defiance. Commentators speculated on whether Earth would last a day or mere hours once the fleet arrived. To prove their superiority, the Empire decided to make an example of them. A single battle group, 1 capital ship, 3 destroyers, and a dozen troop carriers, was deemed sufficient. They had raised entire civilizations with less. This wasn't a war, it was a spectacle. The troops were briefed to expect minimal resistance, perhaps a few acts of desperation before the inevitable surrender. As the fleet entered Earth's orbit, sensors scanned the surface for signs of planetary defenses. There were no shield networks, no orbital platforms, no visible warships. It confirmed what they already believed: humans lacked the capability to wage war on an interstellar scale. The order was given. Troop carriers descended toward major cities, prepared to pacify the populace. The Empire's commanders barely paid attention. They had conquered so many worlds that victory had become routine, a process rather than a battle. Then, something changed. Communications blacked out. Sensor feeds from the ground flickered, then cut to static. Orbital defense scans became unreadable, scrambled by interference. Before the officers could process what was happening, alarms blared across the fleet. Explosions erupted across the descending transports. Entire vessels vanished in fireballs before they reached the ground. The capital ship sensors, once mapping an undefended world, now displayed a coordinated assault of devastating precision. On the surface, something far worse awaited. The first wave of Imperial troops who had made it past the bombardment landed in silence. No resistance, no movement, just empty streets. Then, in the eerie stillness, the slaughter began. The first troops stepped onto Earth's surface with the same arrogance that had carried the Empire for centuries. Their armor was pristine, their weapons humming with power, their formations precise. They moved through silent streets, expecting panic, expecting surrender. They found neither. Then the first shots rang out. Not the energy-based pulses they were used to, but something faster, sharper, kinetic rounds tearing through their ranks before their shields could react. Soldiers collapsed before they could process what was happening. The survivors scrambled for cover, but there was none. The streets they had landed in had been chosen deliberately. Kill zones. Command tried to reorganize, but their comms were down. Orders weren't reaching squads. Automated targeting systems were scrambled. Even their enhanced vision was blinded by bursts of electromagnetic interference. They were deaf, blind, and surrounded by an enemy they couldn't see. Then the second wave hit. Explosions erupted in the alleys, shrapnel slicing through unshielded joints. Snipers picked off officers with inhuman precision. Every time a squad tried to regroup, they were cut down. The fleet in orbit watched in silence, their commanders frozen in disbelief. The initial ambush had been unexpected, but surely their superior numbers would prevail. More transports were sent down, more troops deployed. But the result didn't change. It only got worse. Human forces weren't fighting like the other species the Empire had conquered. There was no centralized command to target, no reliance on automated systems that could be hacked. Their attacks came from every angle, their movements erratic yet precise. They adapted in real time, adjusting their strategy with each engagement. They weren't just resisting. They were hunting. Panic set in. Imperial squads abandoned their formations, retreating toward extraction points that no longer existed. Dropships attempting to retrieve them were shot down before they could land. The streets were littered with bodies, the air thick with smoke and the stench of burning metal. In desperation, the Empire resorted to orbital strikes. Massive energy blasts rained down, scorching entire districts. But humans had anticipated this. The moment the bombardment began, the remaining troops vanished into underground tunnels, hidden bunkers, and reinforced structures. When the dust settled, the Empire had reduced the city to rubble, except for the one thing they wanted most: their enemy. And then, from the ruins, the assault resumed. Guerrilla fighters emerged from hidden passages, striking before fading into the wreckage. Imperial soldiers who had once stood tall as conquerors now huddled in fear, their formations shattered, their confidence gone. Hours turned to minutes. The battle wasn't dragging on, it was accelerating. What had started as an invasion had become a massacre. The fleet in orbit was paralyzed, commanders struggling to process the sheer scale of the defeat unfolding below. This wasn't resistance. This was extermination. By the time they realized what was happening, it was already too late. The Empire had sent its finest, yet in mere hours, its forces were in full retreat. What began as arrogance turned to disbelief, then terror. Imperial soldiers, once disciplined and precise, were now panicked and scattered. Entire platoons went dark, their signals lost in the chaos. The fleet, watching from orbit, scrambled to regain control. It was impossible. Desperate to turn the tide, the Empire deployed heavy armor and elite shock troopers. Walkers, reinforced with energy shielding, stomped through the ruins, their cannons scorching the battlefield. Drones were launched in swarms, programmed to eliminate anything that moved. It didn't matter. None of it mattered. The moment the walkers advanced, human forces adjusted. Guided missile fire came from concealed positions, striking weak points with pinpoint accuracy. Mines placed long before the battle triggered in sequence, toppling the machines like fallen giants. Snipers found gaps in armor plating, ending pilots before they even realized they were targeted. The drones fared no better. Their systems, designed to counter predictable threats, were turned against them. Cyber warfare teams hijacked their signals, reprogramming them mid-flight. The machines reversed course, opening fire on their own troops. Orbital reinforcements were the last resort. The Empire still had control of space, until they didn't. Human warships, far fewer in number, engaged with impossible efficiency. Unlike the Empire's fleets, designed for intimidation, human vessels were built for war. Their weapons, primitive by comparison, tore through energy shields with raw kinetic force. Railguns, coil guns, and mass accelerators punched through armor like paper. The first destroyer exploded before it could return fire. The second tried to retreat and was torn apart in seconds. With their fleet crumbling, their ground forces in shambles, and their technology turned against them, the Empire made one final, desperate decision. They attempted to surrender. Messages were broadcast on all channels, pleading for a ceasefire. No response came. Surrender was never an option. Not for them. Not after what they had done to countless worlds. On the ground, human forces moved methodically, clearing out the last remnants of resistance. Imperial soldiers, abandoned by their commanders, threw down their weapons, hands raised in submission. They begged for mercy, their voices trembling, their bodies shaking. They received none. The slaughter was complete. The invasion, meant to be a swift demonstration of power, had become an extinction event. Not for humanity. For the Empire. As the last shot was fired, silence fell over the battlefield. Smoke and ash drifted through the ruins, the wreckage of an empire scattered like dust. The fleet in orbit, or what little remained of it, was nothing more than floating debris. The greatest military force in the galaxy had been shattered in mere minutes. The galaxy had always feared the Empire. Now, they had something far worse to fear. Humanity. The battle was over, but its impact had only begun. What was meant to be humanity's swift destruction had instead become the greatest military failure in the Empire's history. Their fleet, once the pride of the galaxy, was gone. Their soldiers, once feared across countless worlds, were nothing but corpses littering the battlefield. And their reputation, built on centuries of dominance, had been reduced to a joke. Word spread faster than light. Across the Empire's vast dominion, the news was met with disbelief. No species had ever stood against them and lived. No species had ever resisted and won. Yet here was Earth, a single planet, not just victorious but utterly ruthless in its execution. The High Council, once so certain of their supremacy, fell into chaos. There was no way to contain this disaster. Every conquered world, every oppressed species, now had proof that the Empire was not invincible. Humanity did not gloat. There were no grand declarations, no celebrations. Instead, a single message was transmitted to every corner of known space. Earth is not yours to conquer. Come again, and you won't leave. The meaning was clear. The Empire had been given one warning, one chance to understand their mistake. Should they return, there would be no negotiations, no prisoners, no retreat. Only annihilation. The psychological impact was immediate. Imperial officers, once so quick to demand obedience, now hesitated when issuing orders. Soldiers stationed on occupied worlds began to question their purpose. And on the outer fringes of the Empire, the first sparks of rebellion ignited. Entire colonies, emboldened by Earth's defiance, rose against their overlords. The Empire, already fractured by its own arrogance, found itself teetering on the brink. Some within the High Council suggested retaliation, but they were silenced by fear. Humanity was no longer an unknown variable. They were an existential threat. If a single battle had wiped out an entire invasion force, what would a full-scale war bring? The answer was too terrifying to contemplate. The lesson had been taught. The Empire, once so eager to mock humanity, had learned the cost of its hubris. Earth was not a prize to be taken. It was a warning, a silent predator lurking in the dark, waiting for the next fool to test its patience. And across the stars, for the first time in history, the galaxy whispered not of the Empire's strength, but of humanity's wrath.